The murmurs rippled through the elegantly decorated reception hall as the silver-haired man in the worn suit approached the grand piano. Someone snickered. The wedding planner whispered urgently to the bride's father, who shook his head in confusion. The bride herself, radiant in white lace, froze mid-conversation, champagne glass suspended in air. No one had scheduled this. A middle-aged maintenance worker who had been quietly setting up chairs earlier, now walking with purpose toward the gleaming Steinway that professional musicians had been flown in to play. "Sir, excuse me." The wedding coordinator stepped forward, her voice sharp with practiced authority. "The musicians are taking a short break, but they'll be right back. You really shouldn't." He didn't seem to hear her. His weathered hands, calloused and bearing the marks of manual labor, hovered above the ivory keys. The whispers grew louder. Someone took out a phone, anticipating a viral moment of embarrassment. The groom's mother covered her mouth, eyebrows raised in shock. In the awkward silence that followed, the man closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes floated across the room like a question, gentle, hesitant, searching. Then, as his fingers found their confidence, the melody bloomed into something hauntingly beautiful, a composition that seemed to speak of love found, lost, and remembered. The laughter died, phones lowered. The bride's eyes widened in recognition, her hand reaching instinctively for her chest as if to steady her suddenly racing heart. But to understand why this moment would change everything for everyone in that room, we have to go back 15 years to where it all began. Michael Brennan had once been known for his music. Not famous, not quite, but respected in local circles as a pianist whose compositions could make strangers cry. He taught piano at the community college, played weekend gigs at upscale restaurants, and in the evenings composed music at the baby grand piano in the modest home he shared with his wife, Clara, and their 8-year-old daughter, Emily. Clara had been his first real audience, his most honest critic, and his greatest champion. "That one," she'd say sometimes, pointing to notation on a sheet he'd been working on. "That phrase there, it's like you reached inside my heart and found the exact notes it's been trying to sing." When she smiled at him like that, eyes crinkling at the corners, he felt like the most successful musician in the world, despite the stack of rejection letters from record labels that he kept in his desk drawer. The night everything changed was ordinary. Rain tapping on windows, Clara heading out to pick up Emily from her friend's house just a few miles away. "Play something new for me when I get back," she'd said, kissing him quickly before grabbing her keys. He'd nodded, already lost in a new melody forming in his mind. She never returned. The drunk driver who hit her car head-on walked away with minor injuries. Clara died instantly, the police said, as if that were supposed to be a comfort. In the years that followed, Michael stopped playing. The piano in their living room became a shrine covered with framed photos and gathering dust. He took a job as a maintenance worker at the local event venue, the Westfield, where he'd once performed at charity galas. The irony wasn't lost on him, but the steady paycheck and health insurance for Emily were what mattered now. Music had become a luxury he couldn't afford, emotionally or financially. Emily, who had inherited her mother's warm brown eyes and his own musical ear, tried once to get him to play again when she was 13. "Dad, Mom wouldn't have wanted the music to die with her," she'd said, her adolescent voice trying to sound adult and reasonable. He'd looked at her, this child struggling to fill the void her mother had left, and felt his heart break all over again. "Some things, once broken, can't be fixed, Em," he'd said quietly. "Let's order pizza." She never asked again. The years passed. Emily grew up, went to college on a scholarship, and Michael settled into the quiet rhythm of his reduced life. He worked, he paid bills, he attended Emily's graduation. He existed, but he didn't live. Not really. The other maintenance staff at the Westfield knew him as reliable, quiet, and private. He was the guy who would cover your shift if you needed it, who could fix anything from a broken chair to a temperamental heating system, but who never joined them for drinks after work. What they didn't know was that sometimes, when the venue was empty, in the early mornings before anyone arrived or late at night after everyone had gone, Michael would sit at whatever piano was on site for an upcoming event, and his fingers would remember what his heart had tried to forget. One such night, almost exactly 15 years after Clara's death, Michael was finishing up late after a corporate event. The cleaning crew had gone, and he was doing final checks before locking up. The grand piano stood on the small stage, its lid closed. Almost without conscious thought, he found himself sitting on the bench, opening the lid and placing his work-roughened fingers on the keys. The melody that came was new, not one of his old compositions, but something that had perhaps been building inside him during all those silent years. It spoke of grief, yes, but also of the soft, unexpected moments of beauty that could still catch him by surprise. Emily's laughter on the phone, the particular blue of the sky on certain autumn days, the memory of Clara's voice saying, "Play something new for me." He didn't hear the door open or notice the young woman who had returned to retrieve a forgotten purse. Sophia Andrews, the venue's new event coordinator, stood transfixed in the doorway, listening to music so moving that she found tears streaming down her face before she even realized she was crying. When Michael finally sensed her presence and abruptly stopped playing, slamming the piano lid down in embarrassment, Sophia didn't laugh or apologize for interrupting. Instead, she asked, "Did you write that?" The question hung in the air between them. Michael hadn't admitted to anyone in years that he had once composed music. He'd become so accustomed to being invisible, just the maintenance guy, that being seen, really seen, felt like standing naked under bright lights. "Yes," he finally said, his voice rough from disuse. "It's beautiful," Sophia said simply. "Do you have more? Tell us in the comments if you've ever rediscovered something you once loved but had abandoned." Their conversation that night lasted hours. Sophia, it turned out, had studied music management in college before going into event planning. She had an ear for what moved people. And what she heard in Michael's impromptu performance had moved her deeply. As the night progressed, Michael found himself telling this stranger things he hadn't spoken of in years, about Clara, about his former aspirations, about the void that had swallowed his music. "My daughter's getting married next month," Sophia mentioned as they finally prepared to leave. "Here, actually. She's marrying a wonderful man, and everything's perfect except—" she hesitated. "My ex-husband was supposed to play something special for the father-daughter dance, but he canceled last week. Typical Richard, always letting her down." Michael nodded, unsure why she was telling him this. "Would you consider playing? I could pay you, of course." The request caught him completely off guard. "I don't do that anymore," he said automatically. I'm just maintenance here." Sophia's gaze was steady. "What I heard tonight wasn't just anything. Think about it, please." He promised he would, though he had no intention of saying yes. Performing again, in public, at a wedding of all things, seemed impossible. But that night, for the first time in years, he uncovered the piano at home, wiping away 15 years of dust with gentle strokes. Emily called the next morning, as she did every Sunday. Now 23 and working as a teacher in a city 3 hours away, she had built a life that made him proud, despite his emotional absence during her teenage years. "Dad, you'll never believe who's getting married at your venue," she said after their usual check-ins about work and weather. "Lily Andrews. We went to school together, remember? Her mom runs the place now, I think." Michael's hand tightened on the phone. "Sophia's daughter?" "Yes. How did you know?" "Anyway, Lily invited me. I was going to tell you I'll be in town that weekend. Maybe we could have dinner after? The coincidence seemed too perfect to be random. Michael found himself thinking about Sophia's request again, about the strange connection that had formed between them during their late-night conversation. He thought about Emily, who had stopped asking him to play, but who still sometimes looked at the covered piano with a sadness that echoed his own. "Em," he said slowly, "what would you think if I told you I sat at a piano yesterday?" The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that he thought they'd been disconnected. Then, in a voice thick with sudden emotion, Emily asked, "Did you play?" "Yes." Her quiet, "Oh, Dad," contained 15 years of unspoken grief and hope. During the weeks that followed, Michael began practicing in earnest. His fingers were stiff at first, his technique rusty, but the muscle memory remained. The piece he had played the night Sophia discovered him continued to evolve under his hands. It was a composition about loss, yes, but as he worked on it each evening, it also became about resilience, about the way love changes shape but never truly disappears. He didn't tell Sophia he had decided to accept her offer. Some mix of pride and fear kept him from reaching out. Instead, he practiced and waited and tried to imagine himself performing again without panic overwhelming him. 2 days before the wedding, Sophia cornered him as he was repairing a leaky faucet in one of the venue's bathrooms. "You never got back to me," she said without preamble, "about playing at Lily's wedding." Michael wiped his hands on a rag, buying time. "I'm not sure I'm the right person." "I am," Sophia replied firmly. "I've been thinking about your music every day since I heard it. Please, Michael, it would mean so much to Lily and to me." What she didn't say, but what hung in the air between them, was that it might mean something to him, too. "Okay," he finally agreed, "but just one song, and I don't want any introduction or attention. I'll simply play for the father-daughter dance, and that's it." Sophia's smile was radiant. "Thank you. I won't announce you, I promise. Just be ready after the first dance." What Michael didn't tell her was that the piece he had been perfecting was written with her in mind, not romantically, but in recognition of the unexpected connection they'd formed. It was a thank you, of sorts, for seeing him when he had been invisible for so long. The day of the wedding arrived with perfect June weather. Michael worked his regular maintenance shift in the morning, helping set up chairs and troubleshooting a problem with the sound system. No one, not even the other staff, knew he would be performing later. He slipped home in the afternoon to shower and change into his only suit, the same one he had worn to Clara's funeral and later to Emily's high school graduation. It was slightly too big for him now, his frame having grown leaner with age and grief, but it was clean and dignified. When he returned to the venue, the ceremony was just concluding. He stayed out of sight, watching from a service corridor as the beautiful young bride, Sophia's daughter, kissed her new husband. Emily was there among the guests, looking grown up and poised in a blue dress. He hadn't told her about his plan to perform, wanting to spare himself her disappointment if he backed out at the last minute. The reception began. Dinner was served, toasts were made, and then the DJ announced the first dance for the newlyweds. Michael positioned himself near the piano, heart hammering against his ribs so violently he feared others might hear it. As the first dance concluded, the DJ spoke again. "And now we invite the bride to share a special dance with her father." Lily moved to the center of the dance floor, where her father, a tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit, joined her. The DJ looked confused for a moment, checking his notes. "I'm told we have a special musical accompaniment for this dance?" This was his cue. Michael walked toward the piano, aware of the confused looks, the whispers. He could feel Sophia watching him from where she stood near her daughter, could sense Emily's shocked recognition as he passed her table. His legs felt wooden, his mouth dry. For a moment, he thought he might turn and flee. Then he was at the piano bench, and his hands were on the keys, and none of the rest mattered anymore. Have you ever had a moment where everything changed in an instant? Share with us in the comments. The melody began softly, tentatively, like the first raindrops before a summer storm. Michael kept his eyes closed at first, focusing only on the music, on translating the emotions of the past weeks, the past 15 years. When he finally looked up, he saw that the bride and her father had stopped dancing and were staring at him in confusion. But Sophia was moving toward him, her eyes wide with recognition. She knew this piece. She had heard its earliest version the night they'd met. "Keep dancing," she urged her daughter and ex-husband. "Please." As the music swelled, building toward its emotional center, Michael caught Emily's gaze across the room. Her hands were pressed against her mouth, tears streaming unchecked down her face. He hadn't seen his daughter cry since she was a teenager, had thought perhaps she, like him, had forgotten how. The father-daughter dance resumed, albeit with confused glances toward the piano. Michael poured everything he had into the piece, his loss, his regret for the years of silence, his gratitude for this second chance at the thing that had once defined him. The composition reached its crescendo, then gentled into a conclusion that felt like a question left hanging in the air. What comes next? As the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then, unexpectedly, applause erupted, hesitant at first, then building. The bride was clapping, looking from Michael to her mother with dawning understanding. Emily had risen from her seat, applauding with her whole body, pride radiating from her like light. Sophia approached the piano, microphone in hand. This hadn't been part of their agreement. He was supposed to play anonymously and fade back into the background, but he found he didn't mind. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her professional voice colored with emotion, "what you just heard was an original composition by Michael Brennan, who some of you know as part of our maintenance staff here at the Westfield." More applause, mixed with surprised murmurs. "What you may not know," Sophia continued, "is that Michael is a brilliant composer who stopped creating music 15 years ago when he lost his wife." She turned to look at him, their eyes meeting in a moment of perfect understanding. The bride stepped forward then, still holding her father's hand. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. Sophia smiled at her daughter. "The night your father called to cancel his performance, I discovered Michael playing this piece after hours. I had no idea then that he had composed it himself, or that he would continue working on it, creating something so beautiful specifically for your wedding." Michael shook his head slightly. He hadn't told Sophia the piece was for her, not for the wedding. But she either didn't notice or chose to interpret the gesture differently. "I asked him to play today because I wanted you to have something special for your father-daughter dance. But now I realize it was about much more than that." She turned to Michael again. "It was about remembering that beauty can come from the most unexpected places, and that it's never too late to rediscover the parts of yourself you thought were lost forever." Emily had made her way to the piano now. "Dad," she said softly, just for him, "that was Mom's song, wasn't it? The one you were working on the night she—" He nodded, throat too tight for words. Clara had asked him to play something new for her when she returned. He had finished composing it the day after her funeral, then closed the piano lid and walked away from music entirely, until now. But the truth was more complicated than what either Emily or Sophia understood. The piece he had played tonight contained echoes of that long-ago composition for Clara, yes, but it had evolved into something new. It was a bridge between his past and whatever future might now be possible, a future that, for the first time in 15 years, he found himself curious about. The reception continued. The moment passed. Michael declined the DJ's invitation to play another piece, saying one was enough for tonight. He sat with Emily for a while, answering her quiet questions about when he had started playing again, promising to tell her the whole story later. Guests who had known him only as the maintenance man stopped by to express their amazement and appreciation. The bride hugged him and whispered, "Thank you," though he wasn't sure if she was thanking him for the music or for whatever change she sensed in her mother. As the evening wound down, Sophia found him again. They stood together in a quiet corner, watching the last dancers on the floor. "You didn't tell me the song was for Lily," he said. Sophia's smile was soft in the dimmed lighting. "Because it wasn't. Not really." She looked at him directly. "It was for someone who needed to be reminded of who they really are." "And who is that?" "Not just a maintenance worker, not just a widower, not just Emily's dad." Her hand found his, a brief, warm pressure. "An artist, a musician, a man who still has music to share with the world." Michael felt something shift inside him, a door long rusted shut, creaking open just a fraction. "I don't know about the world," he said honestly, "but maybe a few people." Sophia nodded. "That's how it begins." As guests began to leave, Emily approached them. "Dad, I should head out too. My hotel's across town." "I'll walk you out," he offered, suddenly reluctant to have this day end. At the door, Emily hugged him fiercely. "Mom would have loved that song," she whispered against his shoulder, "and she would be so happy to see you playing again." After Emily left, Michael returned to help with cleanup, falling back into his familiar role. But something fundamental had changed. As he folded chairs and cleared tables, several staff members approached him differently, with questions about his music, with a new respect in their eyes. The invisibility he had wrapped around himself for protection had been stripped away. Near midnight, when almost everyone had gone, he found himself drawn back to the piano. The room was empty now, chairs stacked against walls, tables cleared of centerpieces and champagne flutes. In the dim lighting, he began to play again, softly, just for himself. He didn't hear Sophia return, didn't know she was there until she spoke. "I have a proposition for you," she said. He stopped playing, but left his hands on the keys. "What kind of proposition?" "The Westfield hosts a music series on Thursday nights. Local artists, small audiences, intimate setting. We had a cancellation for next week." She paused. "I think you should fill in." The immediate instinct to refuse rose up, but Michael made himself consider it before responding. "I haven't performed publicly in almost 20 years. "You performed today." "That was different." "Yes," Sophia agreed. "Today you played one piece. Next week you could play several. Works in progress, old compositions, whatever you want." The thought was terrifying and, he realized with surprise, exhilarating. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Sophia moved closer, her expression serious. "Because 15 years ago, you experienced a loss so profound it silenced your music. And today, I watched that music come back to life. I watched my daughter dance to it. I watched your daughter cry hearing it." She shook her head slightly, as if amazed by her own words. "How could I not want more of that in the world?" Michael looked down at his hands, still resting on the piano keys. Hands that had fixed broken chairs and leaky pipes for years while the music inside him lay dormant. Hands that Clara had once held and called magic. "Okay," he said quietly. "Next Thursday." Sophia's smile was like sunrise. "I'll put you on the schedule first thing tomorrow." As she turned to leave, Michael called after her, "Sophia, the song, it wasn't just for Lily or the wedding." She paused, looking back at him. No, he confirmed. It was called Second Movements. Understanding dawned in her eyes, as in music, as in life. He smiled, a real smile that felt strange and wonderful on his face. As in the part that comes after you think the song is over. Sophia nodded slowly. "I like that title. I thought you might." Long after she had gone, Michael remained at the piano, playing softly into the empty room. Tonight had been many things: a performance, a revelation, a homecoming. But most importantly, it had been a beginning. The melody under his fingers was already evolving into something new. Not a piece about loss or even recovery, but about possibility. About the unexpected turns life could take when you least expected them. About second movements that could be even more beautiful than the first, if only you had the courage to play them. Would you have the courage to start again after losing something precious? Let us know in the comments below. Sometimes the most powerful songs are the ones written in silence, and sometimes the most important audiences are not the ones who hear us perform, but the ones who see us practice, who witness our stumbles and hesitations as we find our way back to the music that defines us. For Michael Brennan, that journey had just begun. Where it would lead, he didn't yet know. But for the first time in 15 years, he was curious to find out. And that curiosity, that willingness to step back into the unknown, might be the most beautiful composition of all. Subscribe for more powerful stories like this, and click on the video on the screen to watch the next one with a twist so powerful you'll never forget it.